All right. Welcome to episode 3 of the Never Better Pod. I am Develyn.
And I'm Anthony.
All right. Well, you're leading the topic this week. So what are we chatting about, buddy?
Yeah, man. So talking about the first 2 episodes, talking about things that we're, not authorities on whatsoever, but, we've got some life experience and we're talking about these things through our lens that we're hoping will be relevant to other people to encourage them to have these dialogues of their own. However, I'm excited for this week's topic because the one thing that I feel like I'm most of an expert in or closest to an expert in, have the most knowledge more so than the average bear, is alcohol. I've definitely got my 10,000 hours in selling it, talking about it, and the most amount of hours in drinking it. That's how you and I met. We were professional alcoholics for a solid decade.
Nice. That's great. Very good topic. I mean, I would say you're probably more of an expert than I am, probably both knowledge-wise and experience-wise. I would say you've always been able to drink under the table, but definitely many years of experience to draw upon for this discussion. So I'm excited to see where you're going to take us.
Yeah, totally. So I really want this to be, me sharing my empirical experience with alcohol and how I progressed over the course of my life. Dev sharing some insights of his. We'll back it up with some scientific facts. But at the end of the day, I want to acknowledge my bias of I have a tendency to be a little bit preachy. Sometimes when something works for me, I push it as the be all end all solution for everyone. Just a big preface here, but this is my experiences when I talk about how quitting drinking has positively affected me. I want this podcast to be a little lighter and just to inform you about what you're ingesting sometimes every night. Knowledge is power. Hopefully it's not too much of a bummer, but unfortunately the TLDR, too long didn't read, is, we're kind of poisoning ourselves here. So if you want to find out a scientific opinion about all of this, I'm honestly mainly quoting Andrew Huberman's podcast on how alcohol affects the brain and the body, plus some other sources that I've been researching over the past week. I'll make sure to link all of the sources in the show notes in the comments. So if you're curious about, the real science, go look into this. This is alcohol told through the lens of some ex-professional alcoholics. All right. So I want to start with something that I think is the most interesting differentiator between two types of drinkers. There's a lot of different types of drinkers, but there's one person who will have a glass of alcohol and they'll feel energized, ready to go for more. The more they drink, the more energized they are. As long as they keep drinking, the party never stops. That's me for sure. Absolutely. I'm really good at drinking. It is so much fun. And then there's the other type of person where one drink makes them sleepy. They're instantly tired. The poison settles in right away. And those people are unlikely to develop alcohol use disorders. There's so many other factors that contribute into what develops alcohol use disorders too. The earlier you start drinking, the higher likelihood that you will develop the disorder. If you wait until your 20s, the chances of developing alcohol use disorder drop so dramatically. It's crazy. So switching over to personal experiences here, I started drinking about as early as could be. Grade 7, I remember my first house party when you're waiting outside a liquor store to give $20 to the nearest person to go buy you a bottle of Captain Morgan spiced rum. Went to a party. I don't remember any more details after that, but not good.
Captain Morgan spiced rum. That's always like a place to start.
Dude, I don't know. I think that people drink like how their parents do. And that would be true for me. Navigated towards rum and strong beers, Iron Horse, Wildcat, stuff like that. Okay. For the purpose of this podcast, we're going to define low to moderate consumption of alcohol as 1 to 2 drinks per day, which averages out to 7 to 14 drinks per week. So there's a whole lot of different ways that you could be that low to moderate drinker. You could have 1 to 2 drinks a night, or, you could have 7 on your Friday. I 100% am an alcoholic, was an alcoholic, and first drink at 13. And then I would say weekly by 15. And then from 19 to 29, I want to crunch the numbers at 24 drinks weekly. So I'm going to say for a solid decade, I was in the high use category, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So because there's so many different ways in which people can drink and involve themselves in the culture, becoming aware of how it could be a problem for you is not always super apparent. In fact, after doing a deep dive into this, I find that it's the people with low to moderate level of alcohol consumption that really need to be the most concerned and to really look at the choice that they're making when they're choosing to partake in alcohol. So again, a bummer, but poison might not be worth it. Might not be worth it.
Well, I think it would be something that I assume, based on personal experience, that quite a lot of people, particularly males out there, can feel a connection with this discussion, right? Like, we've all been at that age where you get into like going to parties and you're starting to drink, and there's definitely a lot of like societal pressures to drink heavily at times. I remember, like, like high school, university days, that one-upmanship of, oh, talking with your friends and they say, oh, I had 6 beers yesterday, and oh, well, I had 8, and 12 or whatever. There tends to be this like competitiveness that goes around it, and like how drunk you got, or like I threw up in that bush, or whatever. I think as this conversation progresses, I'm feeling like this will probably ring true to a lot of people, or having experienced it in some way, even if they wouldn't consider themselves an alcoholic by definition. I don't think I've ever fit into that category, even though there's been times when I've like drunk alcohol like very regularly. I think probably, and just in a way, one of the lucky ones that I don't feel like I have that super like naturally addictive personality where I can get like sucked into it very easily. And that being said, there still has been some times within my life where it has been a point of concern for me, like either through like the actions that I've taken while I've been drinking, or just the way that it's making me feel unwell, but then like still continuing to drink. And to then like more like social reasons, when there's been times when I've taken a step back and specifically chosen not to drink for a while. And some of the interesting things that have come up is like a better understanding of why I'm reaching for a drink sometimes. And I think that last point could potentially be something interesting for people that might resonate with them. Or if you are out there and you are somebody that feels like maybe your relationship with alcohol isn't always positive all the time, I would definitely take the time to try and reflect internally for yourself, why you're grabbing that drink sometimes. That definitely helped me reframe things and learn a lot about myself too.
Definitely. That self-reflection, and you realize that when you're crushing those drinks out of social anxiety and then you take a break, you can go into those social settings and prove to yourself that you don't always need it. What I found really interesting about what you just said is how you feel like you're one of the lucky ones by not having these genetic predispositions to alcohol use disorder. And I agree that that's true about you. And I think overall, I do agree that you would be one of the lucky ones. But interestingly, again, to reference Dax Shepard, he's an alcoholic in recovery, an addict in recovery. And he kind of says the opposite, especially in reference to all of the new data that's come out about low to moderate alcohol use. Is if you're a heavy drinker, the heavy drinkers listening to this podcast, you don't really need me to tell you how bad alcohol is for you. I think that that's apparent. Even though you might be so stuck in the addiction, I don't think there's any joke that you're not harming your body. It's the low to moderate people, and especially in a world where alcohol is so commonplace, it's societal glue. It's the only drug that you have to explain why you don't use it. Those low to moderate drinkers, especially as they get older, alcohol starts to take more than it gives, but you haven't had any real reason to make a change. So you can waste a lot of good years of your life.
Yeah, totally, man. That is definitely interesting. Even with, I've had friends who have like properly suffered from addiction, like ended up in rehab and in recovery. And at the time when they were going through that, it was interesting for me, being somewhat on the outside looking in, to think that, oh, okay, well, like, I don't think that person's consuming that much more than me, or more often than me, or whatever. And maybe that does just prove your point there, in that you're within that window of like potential for harm, I guess, or maybe you're not realizing the damage that you're doing to yourself or the habits that you're developing within that kind of like, yeah, you say like mild to moderate consumption level. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'd never thought about it that way.
That's because the reality is that no alcohol is better than any other amount of alcohol. Like, honestly, this data has been out since the late 80s. We'll reference the first study that came out that was super interesting, but talks about low to moderate alcohol use. Again, that's 7 to 14 drinks a week, 1 to 2 drinks a day, however you split it up. And that's chronic use. Chronic sometimes has a connotation that's like my chronic cannabis use, just chain smoking doobies all day, every day. But chronic is really just on a regular frequency. So low to moderate chronic alcohol consumption, 1 to 2 a day, 7 to 14 a week. That is, it's causing shrinking of your brain. That's low alcohol use. Anything above 0 alcohol use is immediately causing damage. It damages the prefrontal cortex and the rewiring of the neural circuitry. The good news is if you've been a low to moderate drinker, if you abstain from alcohol for 2 to 6 months and then ongoing, you can almost completely reverse the effects. If you've been a long-term heavy alcohol user, there could still be some long-term effects from that reduction of the prefrontal cortex. So honestly, it's really scary. So brain, when it comes to health concerns, that's at the forefront for me. If there's anything I can do to preserve this powerhouse of my human meat machine here, I want to do it. Granted, yeah, still smoking doobies daily. But outside of the brain, also low to moderate alcohol use increases your risk of cancer, specifically breast cancer. So that's anything more than 0 alcohol.
Really interesting. Yeah, I think because it's such a commonplace within society, it's not something that you really learn about, or I mean, at least I didn't. I don't remember, being in school learning about, oh, these are the long-term impacts of, drinking consistently or drinking at all. Even some of those things now, working within the industry for how many years has it been now? Like 12 years or something straight. Definitely some of those impacts I wasn't aware of. And you're right in that protecting that brain is like the most important thing.
Big time, man. Well, yeah. So this was one of the scariest parts for me, and something that I felt really rung true from when I was drinking regularly is even when you cut down consumption. So let's say that you've recognized that alcohol is poison. I'm drinking too much. I'm going to cut down. Obviously, that's a great step in the right direction. But honestly, even when you cut down to 1 night a week or 2 nights a week, that causes such a spike in your cortisol that on the times when you're not drinking, the days when you're not drinking, your stress and your anxiety is amplified. It's really, honestly, I got to say, a losing battle. It's a bummer. And honestly, I think maybe a young man's game. I'm really grateful for the incredibly amazing memories that I had that likely, honestly, I will say would not have been as profound and memorable and exciting and cool had I have been sober then. I'm just incredibly grateful that I survived it, that I was able to get a grip on my massively genetic tendency for alcoholism. Honestly, the one thing that I have a lot of gratitude for the men in my family is showing me what I want to avoid.
That's a good point. And it was funny because when you brought up that you wanted to talk about alcohol this week, I had some time to kind of ruminate and think about what it means to me. And similarly, there's a lot of good things. I remember, some epic, really fun nights with your friends, or breaking down some of those social barriers that maybe you felt to like build really close friendships with people, being in really cool places and having a ton of fun. Like, it's been a part of a lot of my late teens and then my 20s and into my 30s for sure. But the other thing that I was thinking about is any of those memories that I have from that time period as well, of like moments of embarrassment or maybe a bit of regret, or thinking about maybe acting outside of my character or things that I wouldn't necessarily be proud about today. All of those also involved alcohol. So was like an interesting thing to kind of ruminate and think on a little bit. And I think that's where people would potentially bring in that argument, like, oh, what about everything in moderation, right? Like when you're coming at it from a purely health perspective, you're saying it's best to just not have a drink at all. I know definitely lots of people that would argue that, a drink here or there or in a social situation or with dinner is fine. I mean, think culturally about the French and how, like having a glass or two of wine with dinner is very much commonplace. The English and their pub culture, going out for a drink after work. This thing, alcohol, is so ingrained in so many of our cultures and our way of life.
Absolutely, man. Can you say everything in moderation when we're talking about a poison? Like, dude, don't get me wrong. I'm being a little bit of devil's advocate
For
here. I
sure.
get the culture so
Necessary for the
ingrained.
conversation, yeah.
I was a victim of it. I love it. I have passion over the history of alcohol and wine culture and everything. But it is really funny when you think about it that way. Everything in moderation, yet if everything in moderation were the case, that would mean low consumption should have no long-term effects. However, that's not the case. You talked about how some of the negative parts of alcohol use in your youth were regretting your actions, saying things or doing things that weren't yourself. They were affected by your alcohol use. Well, that's because alcohol use is affecting that prefrontal cortex, and that prefrontal cortex is involved with top-down inhibition. And when that gets affected, it diminishes your ability to control impulsive behavior. The crazy thing is, though, not only is that happening when you're drinking, your impulsive behavior increases in the periods after when not drinking.
Yes, that is something that since I've been abstaining has become really apparent. And as I say, especially when I think back to those moments or certain decisions or different parts of my life, because of how regularly we were drinking and drinking quite heavily, even if it was only on the weekends or whatever, I consider that entire period of my life affected by alcohol.
Absolutely. And at the time, we might not have even been able to see that clear association,
100%, yeah.
I don't think we were necessarily using the term anxiety when we were partying in our 20s. Like when you felt like the sky was falling on that Sunday, that was just like, I'm just navigating the world as a 20-year-old. I'm just really fucking hungover.
One of the things you brought up earlier on was that like relieving of social anxieties. For me, that was when I like first took a proper break, which was a little more than a year ago now. Because there's been times when I haven't really drank that much, but I was never like, no, I'm not going to drink at all. Even in very casual social situations, I'm going to abstain and have like a serious chunk of time off. And I think it was a little over 3 months or something that I didn't have a drink at all. And that was the thing at the end of it that came up for me is kind of that most important driving factor, or the most challenging aspect for me of choosing like when not to drink was in those like socially awkward situations. I grew up pretty shy, and I don't even know if like shy was necessarily the right word. I think I just preferred to kind of be a step back. I didn't need to be the center of attention. I enjoyed listening and learning from other people and letting other people talk. And if they asked me a question, I would respond, but I wasn't that like outgrowing, like gregarious person in a crowd.
Like me?
Like you, for sure. And that, interestingly, is definitely my improvement in that regard coincides perfectly with when our friendship like developed and flourished. I think I learned a lot from you in terms of like how to speak up a little bit more and command the room a little bit more, which is like, maybe, I don't know if I've ever said that to you like verbally, but I thank you for that like development in myself, which is cool. But it was that like relieving of the social anxiety and like getting out of that desire to kind of be in the background or content with being there, to being more front and center, like going and talking to that person that I would have been kind of shy to talk to because I didn't know them or whatever. That was the main driving factor between me, like in the toughest scenarios when I was trying to not have anything to drink. Those were the moments that were tougher. You're out at a bar, you're at company Christmas party, whatever. It's those situations that were challenging, which even thinking back to like my first experiences drinking, that release of that, like getting rid of that anxiety in the moment and being more outgoing was like, that to me is what became the addicting feature. I can go out to a bar and meet a bunch of random people and not feel self-conscious. But as you say, it's like the negative, the after effect of that and how you feel the next day and the crippling hangovers. And it was only when I decided to stop completely, but then draw on those experiences and kind of understand like, okay, I've been outgoing in social situations for the last 15, 20 years with the help of alcohol. There's no reason why I can't do it sober, right? It's like, I've done it before. I've had plenty of practice. I can still be outgoing and funny and brave enough to talk to that person I don't know without it.
1,000,000%. I love that I inspired you to be more outgoing in some small way through our friendship. That's super cool. It doesn't necessarily come naturally to me. I would say that I'm anxious at the forefront, but through, I guess, a desire to succeed in my role, and networking was an angle to do that. You know, you hammer down a couple glasses and you just say, this is the objective. And I just steamroll through it. So I got pretty good at doing that. Similarly to you, I had no idea what the other side of daily alcohol use was like until I decided to challenge myself to just a 6-month break. And I've said this a million times, but the hardest part about quitting was just how much better I felt, because I was hit with this massive realization of like, okay, so there's just this one small little thing that I've just happened to build my whole life around. Unfortunately, if I change this, then everything gets better.
Mm-hmm.
It should be an easy choice. Yeah. And now, since going back to drinking a little bit more, I found that, yeah, I don't necessarily need this anymore. So 6 months ago, made the decision my rule is I'm not drinking in the city that I live in. When I dissect that now, that's the addict in me, the alcoholic in there, not really officially ready to draw a line in the sand and just say I'm sober for good. Like, for instance, I had this trip to Mexico in January and I'm still kind of conflicted. Do I go and enjoy some Coronas on the beach with my family or do I not? I mean, I know that I could go and do that and then not go spiral back into my old self of drinking every day, but is it worth honestly, the long-term negative health effects of choosing to poison myself with alcohol, even for a week in Mexico? I'm not sure. So we'll get to that eventually and we'll cover it. But also social anxiety, I'm not sure if it's sobriety. I'm not sure if it's maturity. At the same time as I'm learning and I'm going through acts of self-improvement, like challenging myself to quit drinking, I'm also getting older. So what is it, the fact that I don't experience social anxiety anymore, or at least a greatly reduced version of it?
For me, I think the important factor is, it was kind of touches about a little bit of what we talked about last week. It's that like understanding it. It's that like naming it and understanding what's happening in your body, because you've experienced it, you've really thought about it, you've made a conscious decision to do something. That understanding in yourself then frees you from it. That's what I find for me anyway. It's if I maybe now in a social situation, like, and I'm going to go to our company Christmas party here in like a week or two. And at that point, I know there'll probably be some moments when I feel awkward, but like, I don't care anymore. I know what it is. Like, it doesn't scare me. I don't need to reach for that drink to get rid of it. It's like, I know that if I just accept it and be like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I do feel awkward sometimes. So do a lot of other people. Like, I'm sure the person I'm talking to maybe feels awkward about that silence we just had. Who cares? Yeah. The other thing that you brought up earlier on, which it's been so interesting to me, is that alcohol is like the only drug that you have to explain why you don't partake. That has been so interesting in this journey of being like relatively sober. And when I say relatively sober, I think at this point I'm maybe having like a drink socially once a month, if that even. Maybe sometimes going like 2 months. Like, it's so rare that I'm basically consider myself sober. But it's interesting. There's been some instances when you're maybe with a group of people that are a little bit more of a step removed from like who I hang out with on a regular basis, and you're in a social situation where everybody's drinking, and like in these funny situations where somebody's like hounding you to like have a drink, like they feel awkward because you're not having a drink, which is so bizarre to me. Like, I don't care, but I don't know if it's because they feel like they're not being a good host or whatever, but there's something that where like other people feel this need to like keep questioning you Like, why? Like, oh, you sure you don't want that? Like, oh, why don't you just have one of that? Or why don't you have one of that? Until eventually I reached a point in this like scenario that I'm specifically thinking about where I was like, yeah, okay, fine. Like, I'll have a beer just to like kind of get them to shut up, and like,
Yeah.
leave me alone.
It's misconstrued intention, but it seems
Yeah.
like in a desire to connect. And also, like, I think there's a bit of sometimes there can be jealousy involved in sobriety because, especially if someone's been conflicted with their own consumption.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a good point.
Is there any issues that we need to tackle that aren't just a perspective shift, like the masculinity crisis? And let me be clear, the fact that too many men aren't feminists requires a perspective shift. Mental health in general, though so much more nuanced and also biologically impacted, you could argue a perspective shift. Alcohol and the fact that it's just been indoctrinated into our daily life and a part of what we do, a perspective shift. You're telling me that, okay, so again, I'm not going to be preachy. My own personal experience is not yours, but
Mm-hmm.
6 months no drinking and I'm significantly less anxious, happier, clear skin, breaded. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I think part of it is awareness too. There's been a few things, and alcohol consumption's definitely one of them. That example that I just mentioned, like being in a social situation and somebody's kind of like hounding you to have a drink. Like they don't know. Maybe I am like officially in recovery, like trying to stay sober. And that's not something that you should have to
Identify.
identify or like, warn somebody, like, hey, I'm coming into this situation. I'm not having a drink because I've got a problem. Like that shouldn't be a necessary requirement. It's okay to maybe ask once, like, oh, like, do you want to have a drink if you're trying to be a good host or whatever? But to keep hounding somebody at that question, that can be really triggering, really dangerous for people to not be kind of trying to be consciously aware of maybe what somebody else is going through.
Big time. Yeah. So, like a hyper focus aspect of the societal pressure to drinking is what you touched on earlier, that kind of machismo bro culture of drinking too, like the one upping. So, when I have chosen to abstain, it has been for the last 6 months now. The people that gave me the hardest time at the beginning were definitely, my boys, my best friends on planet Earth. But it's with love in their hearts. And then when I explain where I'm coming from, it's totally understood. And I still go to our weekly beers, crush non-alcs or, even cheaper and better, more hydrating soda water with lime. It's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
But on the soccer team that I play for, my teammates have been surprisingly the most supportive of my sobriety.
Amazing.
And we take turns going down the team list by number. And the number each week has to buy the beers for the boys. And my number came up and they were like, oh, they call me, okay, this is embarrassing. I can't believe I tell you guys this, but they call me Big Tone. That, oh, Big Tone doesn't drink. He's not buying beers. He's not buying beers. And a few of the guys, when it's been their turn, they also throw a couple nannies in the bag. There's a couple other guys that don't drink. And, we just play 90 minutes. We're sweating. We're talking about the game. We're having a laugh after. It does not matter that my can says 0 and theirs says 5. It's the same thing. That community, that connection, that's still happening,
Mm-hmm.
just without the poison.
That's amazing. I love that. I don't think my soccer team's not quite that evolved.
So Dev and I met for this liquor retail company that we used to work for. It was a really crazy first day. I had this bad habit of like, whenever I would be stocking the shelves, which is all I would do, I'd stock boy and talk to people about wine. I would flip a bottle in my hand. So restocking the bubbles, and I had like some cheap cava or something and slipped out of my hand, and I instinctively reached down to grab it. And as I reached down to grab it, it exploded and it cut me right between the eyes and my hand, and like gushing blood. I walk up to the front of the store to like seek help. Not in pain, just kind of like, chilling. And Deb walks in for his very first shift at that location. He had previously worked elsewhere in the company, and I extended a bloody hand to meet him, which he didn't grab, of course, but I forgave him because a couple days later, he was cycling up to my apartment. We were going out for beers, and then that set us down this track of we were craft beer boys, right? Like there's this app that exists where you track every new beer that you have. And within like the first 6 months of meeting each other, Deb and I had tried like 500 distinct beers, meaning like 500 different
Yeah,
beers.
talk about that like competition to drink, right?
Yeah. So it's like it's beer social media. So we're checking in. I'm at Garrick's said I had this pint, and Dev's at Smith, then he had this pint. Well, we were always drinking together, let's be honest. But looking for those opportunities to have like a bottle share night, because we're like, man, we have a bottle share night and we each bring 4 beers, and we can get like 20 new distincts tonight or something. And then a year later, I think by the time I got over the app, maybe I moved more into drinking wine. I think I did 1,200 distinct beers in just over a year, and um, too many, too much. But those memories, looking back on, amazing. Like a foundation of mine and Dev's friendship. I have alcohol to thank for that. I have traveled, covered up quite a bit of Italy on 2 different occasions, and drank some of the most amazing wine in the world. Been hosted by the most amazing wine people in the world, paired with the greatest food in the world. And I can never take those experiences for granted. Wouldn't have been the same, wouldn't have had that opportunity without alcohol, without wine.
100%. I think that's the thing, right? I mean, obviously you've come into this conversation by kind of bringing that argument or those some of that statistics and information around like sobriety and like we should try not to drink at all, right? And I think I'm trying to dance along, even though I am essentially sober right now, dance along that kind of edge of, maybe that's not the answer for everyone, but I think the key real thing here is the like understanding the decisions you're making and the health implications, right? Like it's the same with me. I've consciously been thinking lately about the fact that I choose to just drink tea out of tea bags, which contain microplastics. And I need to understand that potential health risk I'm taking by choosing to drink my tea that way instead of going loose
Yeah,
leaf.
you want to have babies, man? You want to have babies that are not?
But that's what I think is the key point, is the fact that me, after working in the industry for whatever the last um 12, 13 years, is like there were some facts that you brought to the table that I was not aware of. That's pretty scary. If you're going to be regularly ingesting this thing that at the end of the day it is a poison, understand what you're doing. But second to that, understand your relationship with it. To say, try and understand like why you're choosing to reach for a drink at times. Make sure you understand if you do have any negative impacts in your life that can be related to alcohol, whether that's something that happens the next day or the day after, because maybe you're still a bit hungover or have those lasting impacts to your decision making. Those are all important things to be aware of.
Big time. Knowledge is power. Perspective is important. But good point that you made there about maybe first and foremost, before going down the path of deciding if alcohol or what level you're going to have alcohol in your life, think about the likelihood that you have to develop alcohol use disorder. So you could be really official and you could get genetic testing. There's lots of online sources available for this now, like 23andMe versions, and they'll come back and tell you if you have the genetic biomarkers for alcohol use disorder propensity. Super cool things like that. On a more realistic level, you can look to your family members. If you have one or more member of your immediate family that has alcohol use disorder, consumes alcohol chronically in a moderate to high level, there's a high likelihood that you have those genetic biomarkers to have the same tendencies. So yeah, check yourself before you wreck yourself.
And the last thing I would say is just that like awareness piece of like maybe what other people are going through. If you find yourself in that social situation where somebody's choosing not to drink, be aware that maybe there's some things you don't know about. Be a little bit more conscious. And it's as somebody out there who's like trying to be actively sober or choosing not to have a drink because it just doesn't make me feel good. Like maybe don't hound people who are choosing not to drink.
Why are you making the decision that drinking alcohol is more important than preventing those crazy, crazy, awful detriments to your health? And maybe your answer is social anxiety. We can overcome that in more positive ways. Maybe your answer is mental health concerns. Well, we got to get to the root problem. We got to communicate. We got to get therapy. We got to seek more positive pharmaceutical solutions like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs. Maybe it's for the social glue. If that's the case, then you can really take a hard look on if it's working for you.
Yeah, for sure. A weekly beer with the boys and just don't have an alcoholic one. Like, um, I, there's definitely a barrier there to cross. Like I for sure would not step foot in a nightclub without having a drink. I think most people probably
Yeah.
feel the same way. But, then now I just choose not to go because I'm getting out of it going anyway. But yeah, I think you will find that if you really don't want to, you can still do anything that you would have done while having a drink with not having one. It's all just about your mindset.
Yeah. And then a wise man once said, it's better to burn out than to fade away. So live your fucking lives. Let's party.
And forget about everything we said.
Give me a drink. Let's go.
As a drink went bubbly. Dude.
Okay, so weekly affirmations. Let's get into it. Who should start this week? Or do we reflect on last week's goals first?
Yeah, we got to look back at our goals from last week's. Mine was to try and get out of the house a little bit, be a little bit more social. That was a bit of a cherry-picked one because I already knew I had plans. But it felt really good. As I had mentioned before, I've been dealing with some health stuff that has just made it a little bit challenging to be my normal self in some ways. Have the energy to kind of get out of the house and do social things. But I went and had wings with my buddy Andy, and then on Sunday we did our annual go up into the mountains, get a Christmas tree thing that we do with some friends of ours, and went and did that. So check that off the list. Didn't reach my goal of the week, and yeah, both instances were super fun.
That's amazing. I saw.
Did you hit your PR?
Dude, I did. I definitely hit my PR, but I undersold myself maybe a little bit. So I knew that I was really within reach of hitting that PR about 6 months ago when I was last training for personal record for squat. I got under that bar and it felt light as hell, and I did 2 super clean ones and then chucked her back on the rack. So yeah, I even have a witness.
Sick.
That was good. Where I fell short a little bit was I was going to carry on my goal from the week prior and continue creative writing in the morning. And I had set 4 mornings. I only got 2 mornings out.
That's not bad.
Those 2 mornings, 30 minutes. Yeah, not bad. Wrote some more poems. I'm loving the morning poetry thing. I'm definitely going to keep it going.
Very cool. Next up, we're going to talk about what we're grateful for. So I can get into mine, I guess. This week, we warned about it on some of our little teasers that we put out there that we're going to talk about our dogs. But I've been especially grateful for my dog, Lou. He's creeping closer to his 10th birthday. And as he gets older, he's just he's slowing down a little bit. His face is getting a little more gray. But he's really just he's always been pretty sweet and cuddly, but he's just really progressing his character in such a nice way. Here, I'm going to turn the camera quickly here. I hope this doesn't mess everything up, but look how cute and cuddly he is in his little bed there.
Freaking amazing.
Cuddling his Christmas tree. Just so happy.
Wow, that's adorable.
I'm, massively, massively grateful for Lou. Dogs are just the best little companions. You got a little bud that you can take with you to do things. They're always happy to see you. Talk about that positivity of waking up in the morning. Your dog's always just stoked. You're hey, another day, let's do it, give me some cuddles, let's eat our breakfast, and you're hell yeah.
Dogs show you what unconditional love is.
Yeah, everyone should have a dog. They're the best.
Everyone should have a dog. I want to invite Alba into the frame for a little bit, but I didn't choose her for my moment of gratitude or awesome. Alba, come here. Yeah, baby, come on. Where are you? Let's go. Hey, good girl.
There she is.
Come on, stay out of the camera. Good girl. Good girl. Good girl. Okay. Amazing. That's great. I don't think that it's a cheap shot that you chose your dog, even though we warned people that we were going to choose our dogs, because guess what I chose? Talk about low hanging fruit. I chose my sobriety.
That's very on theme. A bit on the nose, but we'll take.
And as on the nose as it is, I truly, honestly mean it to be, here's a big reveal to our audience here, to be 31 years old and to have found this out already in my life. I feel an immense amount of gratitude, and I'm just looking forward to being healthy and happy and not letting alcohol use disorder control my life. It had a high likelihood of things going that way if I hadn't snapped out of this when I did. So I don't think that we would be able to have this podcast and talk about topics like mental health and toxic masculinity if I hadn't at least already experimented with alcohol sobriety. So I think that's another amazing byproduct of that. Not only has it given me the motivation to tackle a project when my time's not consumed with either drinking or recovering from the effects of drinking, and then just like positive perspective in general, and a mindset to advocate for positive change.
Totally. I very much feel the same way. I don't know if I would have been able to tackle some of the like mental health things I've been working on this year. Like I just don't know if I would have had the like awareness or capacity to do it if I had been like drinking regularly.
Yeah.
I've already complimented you once in this podcast, but I'm gonna forge ahead and do it again. But I have noticed like a considerable amount of like personal growth within you and your character, and the person that you are and the way that you deal with things, and the incredible like support that you've been to me in our friendship, and especially this year as things have been like challenging for Sarah and I. I don't know if we talked about it before in the pod, but back in September, I like came out and went for a little visit, and I guess we talked about it, went on a little golf trip, and we were out of town, so you had a beer. But yeah, I've like, it's a noticeable difference for the positive. Not that, I mean, I've always loved you, but yeah, I'm proud of like how you're developing as a person, and I think you should be proud of it too.
Thanks a lot, man. That means a lot to me. And similarly, you shared some things with me this year that made me feel all those same things about you. So obviously, we've been buddies for a decade, but I would say for the bulk of that, we were bros more than buddies, and couldn't break through that barrier of probably toxic masculinity and really be vulnerable and get to the deep stuff. I'm sure there were moments of that we probably both don't remember because the alcohol damaged our prefrontal cortex.
Probably.
Anyway, yeah, it's awesome now that we can talk about our feelings and that we don't need to get inebriated to do so. And it's causing us both to grow and progress in like all sorts of aspects of our life. Yeah, man. So that's super exciting.
Cool. Thank you. Next up is our moment of awe. Mine is probably going to be a little bit obvious after talking about achieving my goal of the week and going out and getting a Christmas tree, but being up in the mountains there, overlooking the town of Kelowna as the sun was setting, and for like the first time in what feels like forever, we had actually like a bit of a sunset because the clouds weren't just like totally covering us in. And yeah, we just had a little fire going, great viewpoint, some good friends, some good chats. And yeah, I had like just a moment when like the sky was turning all pink and I was trying to get some photos and stuff. That was just like, man, life's pretty cool. It can sometimes be easy to get a little bit down in the dumps if things are challenging, but when those like moments come through when you're just like, holy cow, like this is a beautiful place. This like world is pretty cool, surrounded by cool people. Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Truly. I secondhand felt that through your Instagram social media posts of that little, I'm not the biggest Christmas guy, but all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I want to go out into the wilderness with Dev and chop down a tree with an axe and then make love by the fire. And then that's like a really romantic scene too, where I picture us like drinking like Bordeaux out of a paper bag or something like that.
I did have a little bit of alcohol. I had a glass of bubbles, but it was all just part of the moment.
Amazing. Okay, so my moment of awe this week was we met up to celebrate my step brother's 40th birthday, and he has a not even 2-year-old son named Carter, and we don't see each other all that often. So when we do, there's like big jumps in his growth, and obviously 0 to 2, when you go a couple months without seeing him, is like this whole new person, and to watch like a human being develop so rapidly like that, and see their personality form is just, it's kind of amazing. And yeah, so like this little dude, we had a mini conversation. I got down on his level and I just like put my fist out, and he just gave me a pound right away. It was just super cool. It was like we didn't need to use words, but we knew where we were each coming from. And yeah, I'm excited to watch him grow. Yeah, so really excited that as much as I love the prompt dream and nightmare blunt rotation. You make a good point that eventually we're going to run out of names that have impact, or,
I think
it's
we
going
should
to,
do it when it like works for the theme. You know what I mean?
yeah. So we're going to switch up this one. This is going to be like our wild card weekly affirmation. And you had the great idea to choose song that inspires positivity. Was that how you worded it?
Yeah, or even just like a good song. I think it's a little bit of foreshadowing as to what like my topic for next week is going to be. But yeah, I wanted to just like pick a cool song basically. There's the song that I keep coming back to over the last couple of months. I like randomly discovered this one band hilariously called Drug Dealer, but they have a song called Pictures of You that's done in conjunction with another artist named Kate Bollinger. I was hoping to see her actually. She played in Vancouver in like mid-November, but at the end of the day I decided to like not make the trip down. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be like snowy and gross, so I didn't get a ticket. But the song just like super groovy, like takes you back to another time. I think it's like fantastic. It's such a good song. You can't like not feel good or like want to like move around a little bit when the song's playing. So give it a listen. Highly recommend.
It's amazing. I'm excited to hear it. What can you give us a little teaser about what next week's theme is, maybe by how they connect?
So my theme that I want to do next week, and I'm hoping I don't have to like pivot at all, very much relying on some information I can get out of a couple of books, but it's basically on what music does to your brain and your emotions. I want to understand what's going on, happening there. So that's the theme.
That's awesome. I heard something similar about that, about how music as a tool to change your mood.
Mm-hmm.
It was part of a larger study about how controlling your inner voice can control your mood.
Yes. I mean,
Like,
that's for sure.
no doubt. Yeah, the way that you talk to yourself, and even the tense in which you talk to yourself, super interesting. But I do far too much of that, and it never results in a calming effect like listening to music. Like, for instance, the song that I chose, I have like a very visceral physical response from listening to it. It like lights up all of the areas of my brain and my body that feel good. When I got these Bluetooth hearing aids like a year ago or something, and they direct line into my Spotify, I don't think I'd ever experienced music quite as profoundly until that moment. Like, the sound quality was just crisp and so clear. I didn't even know prior to this moment that the way that they layer digital audio tracks is you have different components coming into both ears, and there's songs I can listen to and it makes me cry, like makes
Mm-hmm.
my eyes water.
Mm-hmm.
Billie Eilish, Ocean Eyes is a song that does for me. And I love everything about the song and the lyrics. And
That's like
yeah,
that song I think is a good example like for next week's topic, because there is something in that song. It's like the notes or like the way that they string together, something in that sound that just like really pulls at your emotions.
big time. I think that it's the way that she harmonizes in
Yeah.
the background,
Yeah.
and like it's just like angels sing, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. Cool.
My girlfriend Layla and I both have big blue ocean eyes, and we've been doing this when we go on our dog walks. We start a jam on Spotify,
Nice.
and then we can both listen to the same songs in sync through our wireless headphones. And it's especially cool listening to that tune walking down like a pitch black trail at night, since it gets dark at 4:20. It is kind of cool that it gets dark at 4:20 though, because we can commemorate it with a 4:20 dude, bro. Yeah.
So, sobriety.
California sober, man.
All right. Last thing before we close out. It's like our goal for this next week. Mine is going to be, I specifically want to try and focus on my time management. I think it's something that I've like historically been not the greatest at. As you can attest to, I'm always late for everything. I've been a lot better with that lately, or at least I'm a lot more conscious of it, and I've like kind of changed my perspective on it. Before I was like, who cares? But it's disrespectful if you're like specifically meeting with someone or you're expected to be somewhere at a certain time. So as much as I would like us all to be able to just like float around in the world without any time constraints, and you can just take your time to do things because it just feels better, sometimes there's places you got to be and things you got to do at a certain time. So I'm going to really try and work on bettering that. Maybe I will like research some tools how to get better, but it's probably a little bit a tougher goal to like have a concrete whether like I pass failed at that for next week, but I'm going to go with it anyway. I think it's important.
It is important. That's a great like long-term goal, just something to work on overall. It's
Mm-hmm.
especially appropriate for you. That's funny.
I had a doctor's appointment today. I'm really enjoying the book I'm reading right now. So I just brought my book and I sat there for 20 minutes to read my book.
Awesome. Yeah. So my goal of the week is be a little bit of a better master of my own domain mentally. And it's in relation to this podcast. So things were honestly like very under control, or not very under control. What an absolute joke. But I wasn't experiencing this quite as badly until we started launching the podcast. And that is, I got to stop ruminating. Specifically in regards to social media responses to the podcast, I really just need to reframe and stay positive and just enjoy the process. Like one thing that is for sure is the 2 hours that it takes us to record this each week. I have so much fun. I love chatting with you. I think we covered a lot of good conversation, both for ourselves and hopefully that someone else will benefit from. So it's a good thing. Got to remind myself of that. Got to stop ruminating. Got to stop obsessing over every tiny little edit, every little clip.
Yeah, totally. I think the key in something like that, if I can like just offer a little advice for something that in that similar journey for me, and that trying to stop kind of like ruminating on things or replaying things in your mind is like your mind wants to do stuff, right? So it's reframing and thinking about something positive instead. Exactly why I sent you that little screenshot today. It was like we're huge in Norway because we like somebody in Norway listened. Whoever was listening in Norway, thank you. The other 98% of the people listening were all in Canada. But like trying to take those like small wins or little things that are cool. I thought that was neat. That I mean maybe it's just somebody using a VPN or something, but apparently we have a listener in Norway, and I'm gonna take it and run with it.
That is awesome. And you're absolutely right. I also really loved what you said to me the other day when I was deep in a spiral over a social media comment we received. And that was like, our intention of creating this is to spread positivity and to encourage building community and
Mm-hmm.
conversation. So this podcast is positivity at the forefront. So I want to make sure that we never stray from that. And even in covering difficult but important topics, positivity.
I think that's the thing, and that's where the social media thing can be a challenge because we're obviously like we're just trying to promote the podcast. So we're posting like little clips of what happens within the podcast, and within that, I think we could come off in that we're like experts or can be really preachy or whatever. But yeah, I think what I said to you is like the intention of this podcast isn't some like narcissistic pursuit for attention. It's, if anything, like the complete opposite. I wish I didn't feel like we should do this and we could just have conversations as a friend. But kind of like we talked about last week, there's a whole lot of conversation and noise out there coming from like very negative sides of this masculine world. And I feel like as somebody who has some opinions and is willing to listen and learn, that I kind of feel like I have a responsibility to share some of these things to hopefully counteract a lot of that negative stuff. And I definitely like struggled with this idea for a long time, of like, there's enough cis white male voices out there. Like, do ours need to be out there or does mine need to be out there? Should I just be leaving space for other people that have a different perspective? But I'm hoping in that kind of like saying feel a bit of a responsibility to use this privilege that we have to hopefully try and promote something positive.
Yeah. Yeah. And a desire to do it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we all need more positive role models. And I need more positive role models. Like Anthony now would have been such a positive role model for the lost Anthony before. Like
100%. Yes, totally.
we're spreading positivity, we're learning, and this week's episode has been a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm sorry if I bummed you out. TLDR, alcohol is poison, but it can be super fun. So you guys don't care about what I think, but if you do, maybe in some small way, I challenge you to just take 90 days off. Because if you take 90 days off and you get to experience what it's like on the other side, and you choose that, I'd rather have alcohol, then tell me to go pound sand and never listen to any more of this content again for the rest of your life. However, you might find that your life gets a whole lot better. I challenged my mom, and only like 1 month in, she won't stop talking about how her life is
Well,
improving. This is someone who would fall into the like moderate level of alcohol consumption and has consumed alcohol for her entire life, but has never been in that category where it's a problem. Right?
mhm.
Yet abstaining and healthier, weight goes down, skin looks better, anxiety goes down. You start to realize like, whoa, this is so crazy. My main focal point of my social activity is just consuming not just poison, but caloric poison.
And maybe if you decide to take a break, your life might just be never better.
Never better.
Cool. Thanks for the chat.
Okay, thanks, guys.